Marriages are delicate. They take a long time to build, but can be easily damaged by short conversations. My family, like many in Scandinavia, had a nice Friday evening together. Barbara, my wife, called me at work that morning to say she was taking the day off for shopping and would come home late. When she arrived, dressed in a red top, a short black skirt, dark brown stockings, and high heels, she was almost 2 hours late but didn't bring any shopping. She said, "I didn't find what I wanted." We hadn't been intimate for a week, so I hoped for a good evening with Barbara. First, we had our usual Friday family time with the kids. After putting them to bed, Barbara and I had a romantic dinner. Later, in our bedroom, she surprised me by wearing sexy lingerie instead of her usual clothes. I was happy and excited, thinking we would be intimate. However, she rejected my attempts and said she was too tired after a busy day and week. I was disappointed and asked her if shopping and spending time with the family were so exhausting and boring for her. "Are you going to shower after our weekly intimacy out of pity?" Instead of answering me, she ignored the question and went straight to the shower. I was already lying in bed with my back turned to her. It seemed she changed her mind because she then said, "Fine, I'll give in to your complaining, but sex is only important to you, and I'm too tired for anything more than a hand job. No, it's pointless now. If you've already got what you want from others, I'm sorry to bother you. Don't worry about me. I'm just a dumb husband," I said, and continued lying with my back to her. "Someone's in a really bad mood," she said, but I didn't respond. Of course, after our argument, I couldn't sleep. This was the first time this had happened in our marriage, so I expected a stronger reaction from Barbara. I kept wondering what had happened between me and my usually loving wife. My first question was whether I had done something wrong to make her stop loving me, or if she had found someone else. But after thinking about it a lot, I couldn't figure out what it could be. The next question was why Barbara wore her sexiest lingerie to work and shopping, even though she didn't buy anything. That had never happened before either. So after much thought, my only reasonable guess was that she was involved with someone else. Maybe she was in bed with her lover during a supposed shopping trip and didn't want me to find out. I started thinking about our sex life over the past few months, and I realized it had decreased significantly due to headaches and stressful days at work. After all these troubling thoughts, I went to the kitchen to make tea and checked my smartphone calendar. I noticed a pattern in our diminishing sex life. It now only happened on Saturday evenings and sometimes Sunday mornings. It was clear something was wrong between Barbara and me, and she seemed preoccupied with someone else in her daily life. This week, she wore sexy lingerie for the first time and came home late, clearly from some party or event. Whatever it was, it needed to be confronted, even if it meant the end of our marriage. I recalled a survey in one of Barbara's women's magazines where 50% of married women admitted to cheating. This made me think about how husbands react when they find out about infidelity. Some are turned on by it and want their wives to do it again, while others are indifferent to their wives having affairs. Some husbands have gone to prison because they were too cruel when they tried to get back at their wives for cheating. They cried but didn't do anything about it. Other husbands might forgive a one-time mistake but would leave if their wife had a long affair. I thought this was the right way to handle things. In the morning, Barbara made snide remarks about our unsuccessful night together, and then we went shopping as a family. I saw a tabloid newspaper with a story about a famous singer who left her husband after 2 years, saying he cheated and she couldn't trust him anymore. I bought the paper, and at home, during a coffee break, I showed Barbara a different side of me. I said, "I would rather leave my cheating spouse right away than stay in a relationship with them. Do you think our marriage has a serious problem that we need to fix soon? Are you still upset about what happened yesterday? Does it bother you that I get tired sometimes?" She looked angry when she replied. I felt it was time to confront our issues. I didn't have proof against her, just suspicions. But I decided to face the consequences and accuse her of cheating. In response to her, I said, "Yes, it still bothers me that you're so tired every week, and I don't understand why you dress up in sexy lingerie and go on these so-called shopping trips to work. What does that mean? Is it my fault I didn't find anything interesting?" She exclaimed, "I'm sure you think I found something more interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're accusing me of having an affair with someone else, right?" I looked her in the eyes and said this, feeling more sure of myself. But even then, I wasn't ready to end things with her. Barbara was surprised when she realized I wasn't joking. She didn't have a quick comeback, so she simply said, "I'm really sorry. Are you serious about reading this scandalous newspaper?" I pressed on, suggesting it was time to address all our issues and move forward. I assured her I would find out about her affair eventually. Wouldn't it be better for both of us to face the truth and do what's best for our lives now? She was still shocked and didn't reply. "You must be imagining things," she finally said. "I've never cheated, and it's normal to be tired on a Friday after a stressful week, right?" "Don't you think?" I responded. She angrily left the room and avoided me for hours. Later, our friends Gwen and Douglas invited us to dinner. Despite our unresolved argument, we decided to go. During dinner, Gwen asked Barbara and me what our plans were. It turned out she had managed to get 4 rare tickets, and we were given 2 of them. I surprised everyone. I thanked Gwen but explained that Barbara and I were taking things day by day and couldn't plan for the future. This caught everyone off guard. Barbara asked, "What do you mean?" I replied, "Exactly what I said earlier. We need to deal with our issues before we can move forward." Gwen then asked, "What's going on?" I told her, "It's better to ask Barbara why we're having problems. I suspect she might be cheating on me." Gwen looked surprised and asked, "Are you sure?" "No, not at all," I admitted. "Our problem is very serious. I strongly believe Barbara is having an affair based on strong evidence. I want to make a fair deal now. If I'm wrong about Barbara, I'll take her and the 4 of us to the show, paying from my gaming account for tickets, hotel, and food. But if you can prove Barbara is cheating on me right now, I'll serve her with divorce papers on Monday morning. I'm fed up with her behavior." Douglas said, "That's nice, but I don't think she's serious." I insisted that Barbara was guilty. Gwen responded positively to my offer. Barbara smiled but didn't speak. Then I said, "I'm serious about keeping my word." I went to the hallway, took Barbara's purse, and handed it to her, asking for her phone and password. I promised to go to the show if I found no evidence of cheating. But if I found something suspicious, or if she tampered with the phone, I would take it as evidence for divorce on Monday. I set a timer for 3 minutes and waited. Gwen and Douglas were shocked as Barbara grabbed her purse and ran out without a word. They asked me what I would do next. I explained I couldn't do anything without knowing her password. Gwen mentioned hearing rumors but promised to update me if she found out anything. "What should I do now? I'll go back home to my kids, keep my promise, and divorce my wife for cheating," I said. Douglas asked, "If Barbara is innocent, will you really pay for my travel expenses?" Barbara was my true love, and I would rather miss the game than lose her. Douglas said, "I didn't know you were such a big gambler to take such a risk. Remember, I'm a bad player who lost both the game and my marriage. Maybe Barbara would have failed too if her lover was married and didn't care about her. But I'd rather be a bad loser than a sad husband who accepts a cheating wife. I won't let my pride allow that." I took the kids home. As I expected, Barbara wasn't there, but to my surprise, she came back an hour later with red eyes. She asked if we could talk about our problems. We agreed and sat down at the kitchen table after the kids went to bed. "Are you happy that you made me look like a cheating person in front of our friends?" she asked. "It's time for me to know the truth. Are you accusing me of cheating?" "No, I'm not accusing you of anything," I replied, "but I can't deny anymore that I've been seeing someone else." "Are you happy that you won't have to pay for Gwen and Douglas's travel to their shows? Are you happy?" she questioned. "No, not at all. Today is one of the worst days of my life. There's no joy in this for me. My heart is just filled with disappointment and emptiness for what I've lost. I thought I had a happy family. How could you do this to them? The children will suffer the most from all of this," I told her. "Please don't make any rash decisions until we talk about what we can do to save our marriage. I love you so much, and I believe there's still hope for us," she pleaded. "Why did you do this?" I asked. "Was I really such a bad husband and lover that you had to be with another man? Or are there more than one? Please understand this was just a brief romantic affair that doesn't diminish my love for you and our children. Family is my priority, and I promise to be faithful and loving again if you'll have me. Who is he? Or are they friends? How long has this been going on, and did it happen in our bed? I need to know." "It's just one man, and we have strong feelings for each other," she replied. "We tried hard to resist temptation for a long time, but a month or 2 ago we couldn't deny our feelings anymore, so we confessed," she explained. Our relationship is secret and temporary. It doesn't matter who he is now. He's the most important person in my life, she added. It does matter. I will find out who he is and make sure he faces consequences for breaking up our family, I said firmly. If he's married, I'll ask his wife why her husband isn't intimate with her during the week, and if he's giving her what he's not supposed to give me, he needs help, I continued. After you left Gwen and Douglas, did you go to him to end the affair? Or are you celebrating being single now? You don't need to pretend to love me sweetly on Saturdays anymore. A future where you can openly be with him would be wonderful, right? I asked. No, I haven't seen him today. I just called him briefly to tell him you know about us and are upset, she replied. I'm married to you, my beloved husband. I love you deeply and hope our marriage can survive this, she concluded sincerely. Listen, calm down and understand that if you continue this, it will be disastrous for you and our family, she warned. I never thought Barbara was foolish, but I started to worry that her lover was influencing her. I responded, So you're saying your lover is married and you didn't want to disrupt his family? It seems like you care more about him and his family than you do about me and our kids, right? Is he blackmailing you or forcing you into this? I asked. Barbara began to cry. I told you, it's just a harmless, short romance and it'll end soon, she insisted. You shameless... She didn't stop lying as soon as she was caught, did she? Are you going to keep seeing this pimp like nothing happened? Please calm down. My friend has influential connections and violence will only make things worse for our family. When our emotions settle, I'll be your loving wife again and promise to be faithful forever. Are you suggesting violence bothers you? Is your lover threatening me? Rest assured, he will face consequences. You promise to be faithful to your lover, I questioned. Barbara, can't you see what a terrible, cheap person he's turned you into? I yelled in frustration. It was clear Barbara understood I didn't see her affair as just a fling. She seemed afraid of the consequences and ran into the bedroom, screaming loudly. After a nearly sleepless night in the guest room, I left early Sunday morning. I left Barbara a brief note. I'm going fishing and will return later this afternoon. I wasn't really going fishing. Instead, I drove to a small coastal town where a childhood friend's guest house awaited me, having booked a room the previous night via text message. I got there in time for breakfast and had a good sleep before a lovely dinner with my hosts. Feeling better, I took a relaxing walk and thought about the future. I felt disappointed in myself for not noticing any patterns in Barbara's excuses for turning down sex and not suspecting anything was wrong. But I realized that besides her avoiding intimacy, there wasn't any other proof to back up my suspicions. Still, I gave myself credit for confronting her as soon as I noticed the first signs, a suspicious shopping trip in sexy clothes and coming home late. Surprisingly, less than a day after my initial accusation, Barbara confessed to cheating. There was no concrete evidence, but I managed to get her to admit it without using force. If her affair had only happened that Friday shopping trip, we might have had a better chance of working things out together, even if it took time. As the affair continued, instead of ending it right away, she foolishly talked about stopping her innocent romantic feelings. In my opinion, this was nonsense. My phone was off for a while, so I sat on a big rock and checked it. There were 5 missed calls and 3 messages from Barbara, all saying the same thing. Call me when you can. Barbara, I'll be home late. See you tomorrow. Barbara. There were no meaningful messages about love or caring. Then my phone died again. I thought divorce would be bad for the kids. But as long as Barbara kept cheating and let her lover control our sex life, it seemed like the only option. Barbara wouldn't admit this and probably wouldn't agree I was right. But I felt completely humiliated. That night, I checked my phone and saw several missed calls and a voicemail from Barbara crying. She apologized for hurting me and the kids. She said her affair was over and that I was her beloved husband and always would be her only love. I saw this confession, 2 months late, as a final admission of guilt. But I didn't care anymore. If she had ended the affair right after the press conference, it could have stayed her secret. Or if her fake shopping trip had been a one-time thing, maybe there could have been hope. But 2 months was too long. Even though she seemed to have come to terms with it, it didn't matter anymore. When I got home, I was glad to find Barbara asleep. I slept in the spare room and left for work before she woke up. I left a short note on the kitchen table. As soon as the court opened Monday morning, I went to file for divorce. I filled out the papers at work and went to Barbara's office to ask her to sign them. She refused and started crying loudly. I left her office, returned to court, and filed for divorce without her signature. It didn't change much, maybe just delayed things by a couple of weeks. Barbara didn't come home after work, but her sister Annie called urgently, needing to talk to me about Barbara. I invited her to come over right away, and she agreed. Annie came and told me that Barbara was at their parents' house, completely devastated. Annie wanted to know the truth about what happened between Barbara and me. I told her that Barbara admitted she had cheated on me with her lover and planned to continue the relationship. Even after I found out about the affair, she didn't try to end it when we talked. I couldn't stay married to a wife who was going to keep dating and sleeping with the man she cheated with. Divorce seemed like the only solution. Is he married? If so, does his wife know about their affair? Annie asked. Don't ask me. Ask his wife, I replied. His wife's name was Maria Brahm. It became clear that Barbara was having an affair with Edward Brahm, an accountant at her workplace. She had met him several times and thought he was a well-dressed, slightly effeminate man. I decided it was important to have a serious talk with Edward and Maria Brahm. I asked Annie to look after the children while I visited them. She agreed, saying, "Please understand, the children need you right now." I went to Edward's house in a nice neighborhood. A 7-year-old girl answered the doorbell. I asked if her mom and dad were home, and she said her mom was there. Maria came to the door, and I introduced myself. I told her I needed to talk to her about something serious. Maria was a very beautiful woman. She invited me into the kitchen and offered me a seat at the table. I sat down and said, "I have some sad news. My wife, Barbara, who works at the same company as your husband, admitted that she's been cheating on both of us for the past 2 months. Maria looked shocked and asked, "Are you sure?" I became suspicious when Barbara and Edward limited their intimate time to Fridays, leaving me only Saturdays for what they clearly loved, I explained. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. After our conversation that evening, Edward admitted everything. There was no regret or uncertainty in Barbara's actions. "By the way, where is Edward?" I asked. Maria turned pale and replied in a scared voice, "He's gone. What are you going to do about this sad situation?" "Edward already knows," I said, "because I gave him the divorce papers today at my wife's workplace. I think everyone at his workplace already knows too, because there was a big commotion." "Edward told me what happened at work, but what about you? Do you know anything?" Maria and I decided to share all the extra details, and I left her feeling uneasy. How could that foolish Edward cheat on his beautiful wife and have an affair with Barbara, who was no better than his own wife? When I got home, I told Annie about my talk with Edward's wife. She had to decide whether to tell Barbara what I had done. Barbara should have called me about the divorce. The next morning at work, Susan Lind called and asked me to have lunch with Barbara to discuss important matters concerning me. I knew she was a beautiful divorced woman, and I was curious about what she wanted, so I agreed to her proposal. We met in a small restaurant, and after some polite conversation, she said simply and directly, "I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to rent a furnished apartment for myself for a while until I figure out what's right by moving in with my boyfriend, Alf." I was surprised how quickly rumors about my divorce had spread. Of course, I was intrigued. Susan explained about the fair rent and other benefits. She offered it to me because she trusted both me and Barbara to take care of her apartment. When I returned to work, I called Annie and told her I had bought a furnished apartment until Barbara moved in with Edward Brahm somewhere. But Annie said that was impossible, because Edward had gone completely crazy when he returned home from a bowling match to find his packed suitcase in the driveway with a security guard at the front door. During a frantic phone call with Barbara, he accused her of being unfaithful. Annie had to cut our conversation short due to urgent business and arranged to meet later that evening. As expected, she arrived and told me about Barbara's situation. She said she nearly fainted after Edward's frantic call and took an extra day off from work. Annie, who was married and lived only a few hundred meters from her parents, spent a lot of time supporting Barbara. Barbara confessed to them about her affair with Edward. What caught my interest was that Barbara and Edward used a small apartment next to a furniture store as a secret meeting place when they had long lunches on Fridays. According to Edward, they split the rent with a secret group of businessmen using an online booking system. Edward bragged it was cheaper and less noticeable than a hotel room. Barbara even went to a famous historic hotel to celebrate Edward's birthday the following Sunday and confessed the fake shopping Friday to Annie. Not far from here, they had a long lunch and made love in a room where a royal once slept. Barbara realized her mistake with the sexy lingerie, which made me suspicious enough to end the marriage. Annie packed Barbara's clothes and things she needed. I told Annie that if Barbara wanted, I would talk to her about the divorce and the children as soon as possible. It was also clear that Edward had powerful friends. Instead of helping Edward, I needed to find something to turn him against me. That evening, after thinking a lot, I got a brilliant idea. I called my old friend Anders and asked for his opinion. He immediately liked my idea and promised to work on it. The next day, after a quick lunch, we decided to visit Edward's secret love nest. It was easy to find, just like Annie had told me. It was located right on the street and had originally been used as an office but was now turned into a small apartment. It was indeed a very secluded place for secret affairs, with a mailbox and a small brass sign that said, Patent Office. Clearly, Edward's group had created the perfect place for secret extramarital pleasures. Back at work, I called Annie to arrange for a babysitter while I went shopping after work. She begged me to do something about Edward's secret apartment. She also promised not to tell Barbara or anyone else what she had told me about the love nest, or that she had helped me when it was necessary. Dressed in gray overalls and a baseball cap, everyone thought I was just a regular customer at a large construction and hardware store where they could find everything they needed. On Thursday evening, Anders called me and said he was ready to go. A few minutes later, he texted me, "The action is done." I thanked him and promised to update him as soon as I found out the results. Early the next morning, I arrived at Edward Brom's apartment building. Again dressed in overalls and a baseball cap, I used a cordless drill to secure the door with 12 strong screws. The next step was placing a stainless steel sheet, 50 by 30 centimeters with bright red writing. For more information, call Edward Brom at 089-7744-299. I also secured this sign with strong screws. Single-sided screws are used for security purposes, making it impossible to unscrew them once they're in place. The sign displayed Edward Brom's office phone number, which he had distributed via 250 emails to employees and other influential people in the city. These emails included a photoshopped image of the new Love Nest sign and the following message. Dear married friend, finding a completely private place for intimate pleasure can be challenging, especially if your special someone is married. Affairs in local hotels often lead to costly divorces, but you can avoid this with a cozy, well-appointed love hotel in our city center. Rent a room for 2 hours and receive a door code on your smartphone for discreet access. For more information and additional services, call during business hours. Photo of Edward Brom's private apartment, 889-774-4299. I didn't care about the reaction of Edward Brom and his friends, who would soon be furious. I knew nothing about what was happening until Anders called me at 1:30 in the morning. He chuckled and said, "We've trapped Tommy Shawnee in that sex chamber and he's still inside. Should I bet money on it too?" There were rumors that a curious crowd had gathered outside, including a radical feminist reporter from the local newspaper waiting for answers. After pondering my options, Anders suggested placing a bet. The apartment had double doors, so the locked lovers couldn't hear anything while I was working on the doors. Tommy Shawnee, a 53-year-old bachelor, chairman of the local Green Party and a troublemaker who often opposed city council decisions, was rumored to be a womanizer. He had a reputation for causing trouble in marriages. Neither Anders nor I wanted to be seen among the curious crowd when the love room was finally opened. However, Shawnee's reputation made us curious about this incident. I didn't win the bet, but Anders and I were surprised when the person's name was revealed shortly after 1 p.m. It was Alice Neville, a beautiful 43-year-old blonde, leader of the local Conservative Party, and married to a successful businessman. There's an old saying that love is blind, and most people agreed when they found out who she had spent the night with in the love room. Later, they debated why she had waited so long to open the door, turning the incident into a public spectacle. Shawnee panicked and called the wrong people, causing rumors about the door problem to spread before it was fixed. When her husband found out she had spent the night with Shawnee, he left her. Shawnee's political activities didn't interest many, but his reputation with women made him a local hero. When he went to a bar, regulars often gave him free drinks. More women wanted to see if rumors about his abilities were true, so he had to share information with his fans. After some time, Barbara calmed down and signed the divorce papers. We discussed joint custody of our children who stayed at our home. Barbara and I decided to alternate weeks at Susan's house and apartment. During Christmas week at Susan's house, I invited Barbara to stay with me and the kids. She slept in the guest room, and our family life felt like the good old days. When we were apart again, I couldn't help missing her. One evening that week, after the kids had gone to bed and we were drinking wine and eating cheese in the living room, Barbara talked about Edward Brahm. He never thought his wife would find out about his affair. When I told her, she kicked him out, causing him to have a breakdown. He blamed Barbara for his problems, turning their once romantic story into regret and hatred. Barbara shared gossip from work, Edward's love nest, the Neville-Shawnee affair, and the phone calls that led to Edward being nicknamed the Pimp. His colleagues laughed at him, and his apartment gang friends became ex-friends. They blamed him for the scandal with Alice Neville and billed him for the door repairs. When he refused to pay and they threatened worse, he quit his job and left town. Barbara and I surprised everyone by spending New Year's Eve together at a party with Gwen and Douglas. When we were together, our family went to the Canary Islands every February. A problem arose when the children asked, "Dad, can Mom come with us?" After arguing, I gave in and asked Barbara. Because I booked the hotel late, we could only get a family room instead of a room with separate beds, which is what we're used to. Barbara and I had to share a bed, but everything worked out fine. We made every effort to have a good week this year. On our last night at the hotel, I woke up to hear Barbara crying softly. I was concerned and asked her if she was sick or needed to go to the hospital. She replied that she was crying because she felt so grateful and happy for the past week. It had been the happiest time of her life, and she would miss it. She apologized for waking me up. I couldn't help but comfort her. I hugged Barbara and told her that it had been a wonderful week for us too. She looked at me with surprise and whispered that this was the best gift since we had children. She expressed her love for me and said she was the happiest woman in the world. Barbara's tears weren't the only reason she was emotional. Throughout the week, I realized that Barbara was still my true love. No one I met during our separation could replace her. Even before we left the hotel, I decided to suggest to her that we shouldn't get a divorce. Epilogue. We didn't discuss the reasons for our past problems or what we did during the separation much, but Barbara told me she hadn't dated anyone during that time. She believed we were still married until the divorce was finalized. To my surprise, Barbara never asked me about my activities during our time apart. While I can't change the past, I'm determined not to repeat the same mistakes. Barbara and I decided to talk about what we needed to do in the future to rebuild our happiness as a family. Second story. Cheating husband lies about texts that were found. I looked through my husband's iPad where his phone's texts were linked. I discovered he's been planning a trip with a woman he used to date 20 years ago. According to the texts, they planned for him to say he was going on a fishing trip while her husband and kids were out of town. He had already told me he was going on a fishing trip next week with a friend. I confronted him with all the evidence from the texts. He denied cheating and claimed they were just flirting, saying they would never actually go on the trip. What should I do? Should I believe him, or do I feel foolish?